Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be with you here again today. It's a bright, happy morning. I hope you feel like that as well. Today, we're going to make something really interesting. It's quite the process, but it's one of my favorite snacks. I had to say that twice because let me not even put any words to it. I just want the essence of what we're going to make to shine through in the process and when we finally taste it. Today we will be making cinnamon rolls. Welcome to Karen's Cook and Bake Therapy. Growing up, I looked at so many cookbooks, magazines, and for some reason, every time I opened a magazine, the page that had something to eat drew me. And for some reason, still, most of these magazines and books around me had pastries. And the one pastry I usually wondered what it was like to make was a cinnamon roll. But every time I saw something nice and exotic, I decided that when I grew up, I would make it myself. So I cannot say that I first tasted a cinnamon roll in any particular place, though I remember the first time I tasted a cinnamon roll. I was downtown, there's this shop near those arcades on William Street or one of those streets, Lewum Street. I think it's in Take Bakery. And when you go downtown to do some shopping and you just want a snack, I remember chancing upon a cinnamon roll. And I decided that I needed to learn to make it. So the beauty about the cinnamon roll is that it brings a certain taste of luxury into your life. And so if you want to go, home and chill and just feel like maybe you're in which place? Let's say Milan. Milan is like my favorite dream place to go to. And you want to dream of being in such a beautiful place. I think a cinnamon roll brings a bit of that. As we go into how I discovered cinnamon rolls, I just want us to start this process. I have my favorite recipe book or only recipe book here. I've had it since 2007. And like I was saying previously, it's important that you have a recipe book because you can use it and pass it on to your children and your children's children as an heirloom. So today we're going to dive right into making a cinnamon roll. So a cinnamon roll starts with a pastry that is bread-like, and that's what we're going to start with. I have a little bowl and plate here because we first have to let the yeast rise. People use different words for the yeast: rising, growing, so many different things, but I'll just say rise. And in order to do that, we need a bowl. You can use a plastic dish with an airtight cover. This is what I like to use, a bowl covered with a plate. So we're going to work on our yeast. And in order to do that, we need, let me put this safely in here. We need warm water, lukewarm edging on the side of hot. And then we will put in a teaspoon of sugar and we'll put in 2 teaspoons of yeast and we will cover that and put it aside and wait for it to rise as we prepare our dry ingredients, where we will later put this mixture. So we're going to start by making that. So with our little bowl there, we're going to get some sugar. A teaspoon. This is not a real teaspoon, it looks bigger, so I'll just use about half of that of sugar. And we're going to mix that and create some lukewarm water. Let me just get our kettle or flask. So you have to make sure that you can actually touch this water. And one of the most important things when we are cooking and baking, of course, is to make sure that our hands are clean. So that's hot water. And since I have to check the temperature, it's important that I wash my hands. I have some soap here. One of the things I really love is to get a good manicure. So I usually have long nails. And some people would say you can't cook with them, but I think it's just important to keep them clean. So my hands are clean. We've put in our hot water. We're going to mix that. And then we're going to add a bit of cold water. You can get the water from the tap, or if you're a stickler for making sure that everything that goes into your pastry is boiled or something, you can also do that. So I usually use boiled water, and that's what I'm going to do. I feel like it's not yet warm enough. So you may wonder how much water to use. About a cup. If you have these measuring cups, about a cup full of water is okay. I just measure with my eyes. So yeah, we're mixing up that water. Yeah, so your finger should be able to sit in that comfortably without you feeling like you're going to get burned. And then you put that sugar, and that's what is going to help us have the yeast rise the way it's supposed to. I have measuring cups here. Something about measuring cups is they come from different countries. So 1 cup from America may not be the same exact measurement as 1 cup from the UK or from South Africa. These ones I bought in a so-called Game that closed recently here in Uganda. So those are South African. And I'm just so used to them. I tried using another cup and it did not work for me. So we are doing 2 teaspoons of yeast into that. And when you put your yeast into the water, you do not stir, because if you do, you may interrupt the process of the yeast actually growing. So I've done that, and you have to cover with something airtight. I find that this combination is perfect for me. So we're going to put that aside and hope that that works out. And now we're going to move to our dry ingredients. I have my recipe book here because I've crammed some of my recipes, but not all. So for this one, we need 3.5 cups of flour. So that's what we're going to put in here. Growing up, we used to sieve our flour. And I'm sure when mom sees me, she's going to be like, why aren't you sieving your flour? But I sieved flour for so many years. I don't feel like doing that right now. Someone was asking me about how we learned how to bake. Growing up, we used to make our own grabs. So when you wrote your list for school, we would write the baking ingredients that we needed. And we used to make cookies, daddies. One time we even learned how to make sim balls. Basically, it was up to you to create the list of grab you wanted, as long as you could make most of it yourself. So that's one of the things that helped me really learn how to bake. So we have 1 cup. We're aiming for 3.5 cups. So that's 1 cup. Do you ever close your door when you're leaving home and then you reach somewhere and feel like you didn't close it? That happens to me a lot when I'm measuring flour. So I hope you're also mentally counting with me. 2 cups. 3 cups. And this in itself is 1/2 cup, so we're going to use it for that measurement. You can pour from the pack or you can scoop, but it's not ideal to scoop and then think that that's the measurement. It's not very ideal. That's why I scoop with 1 cup and pour in the other. So we have 3.5 cups. I hope you counted. So that's it. I should have talked about all our ingredients so that you'd gather them before, but I can still do that now. We have our flour, we have margarine, we have icing sugar, yeast, nutmeg, we have cinnamon, bananas. Not bananas. Why am I saying bananas? I think I want to eat a banana. We have eggs, we have milk, we have some salt, sugar, we have our tissue to make sure that we are clean at all times. We have some spoons and a fork here, and we have our measuring cups. So we've measured our flour. Those are 3.5 cups. We need 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And I have my spoons, so these are measuring spoons. So this is 1 teaspoon, and I can get the half one as well. So we need 1.5 teaspoons of salt. So here we go, 1.5. Just always make sure that they are flat. 1.5 teaspoons of salt. We're good to go with that. And then 1/2 cup of sugar. We're back to our 1/2 cup. And if you don't have a cup, you can actually try to figure out some of these measurements using tablespoons. 3, 4, and 5. 1/2 cup of sugar is usually 6 tablespoons, slightly over 6 tablespoons of sugar. So we have that. We're going to put that in. And then we're going to stir that. You can actually make your cinnamon roll pastry without any spices, but I like mine with a little bit of spice. So we're going to add some nutmeg. So nutmeg is one of those really strong spices and I really love it. So we're putting 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. And then we're going to put a teaspoon of cinnamon. These are usually my Christmas cinnamon rolls. If you're doing them on a daily, you can eliminate the spices. But yeah, so we're going in with that. And then we're going to go in with some cinnamon. That one we will do a teaspoon of cinnamon. Just to add a little bit of a twang. So yeah, we're good with that. And we can mix that with a spoon or with a whisk. I have a spoon here, so we just do that. Yeah. Very quick and easy. We're going to use some eggs and we're also going to use some milk, but it's very important that we wait for the yeast to grow or rise, and it will be the first liquid we put in after we've put everything else together. So we are good with this. Just make sure that everything is neat and in there. And now we're going to measure our butter or margarine, whatever it is you have. But before we get to the margarine, it's important that we make sure that our other liquids that we're going to use are ready. So I'll first put that aside and let's make some milk using our powdered milk. And let's also make sure that our eggs are ready to go. For our eggs, it's really easy. Some people like to whisk them, but you can just use a fork. Whatever you have at home, you can use to make it easier. You do not need to have so many things to be able to bake. I remember the first time I tasted a cinnamon roll. And then one day, one of my little apprentices or something came with a cinnamon roll, and she was so excited to share it with me. So I think I have many encounters of tasting a cinnamon roll before I made it myself. But I decided that one day I would make it myself and it would become one of my comfort pastries. I really love comfort food. I hope you do too. I usually say that comfort food is something you eat and it feels like a hug. So here we go. Our egg is ready. Let's make our milk. Let's see, how much milk do we need? We need a 3/4 cup of milk. So we're just going to get some powdered milk here. I think about 3 or 4 teaspoons of milk should be enough. We can mix that up with some hot water and cold water. Yeah. I'm just thinking about taking a peep at our yeast. It usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes for it to rise really well, sometimes even less, depending on if you got the temperature right. With this, I'm going to add some cold water. It doesn't matter if it's boiled or from the tap. It's just what you think and feel. So this time, I'll use water from the tap. Just have to have that almost quarter way full. And we're good. Our milk is ready. So now we're going to put in the margarine and then let's see what's happening with our yeast. It's still growing. We need to give it a few minutes. So since it's the first liquid that we're going to add, we need to give it a few minutes to rise. Let's do that and then we will be back to actually continue with our mixing, okay? So we are good now. We've mixed our flour and all our other dry ingredients, and it's time to go into adding the margarine, and then we will add our yeast. We've not looked here yet, and I'm so excited that we're going to open that and look together and see what it looks like. So now we're going to add in the margarine. We need 125 grams of margarine. I usually say buy small sizes so that you can easily split them or just use them as they are. So this is 250 grams and we're going to use 125 grams. That's really easy because we just have to cut half of that. So I'll just do half and then I'll put it in. I'll wash my hands again because it's important that our hands are clean, and then we will dive in, okay? So let's do that. Most times I use table knives for everything, but you can use a spoon, whatever is easier for you. I like the table knife because I use it to split or to sort of cut in half, but I think a spoon would probably be more effective. So we're going to put this margarine in here, and you can use a spatula, you can use all sorts of things to mix, but we all know here in Uganda, and I know even other people around the world, you'll just use your hands as long as they're clean to mix your dough. So yeah, that's 125 grams of margarine. You can use butter, any fat you have at home is what you can use. It does not have to be any particular brand. And butter has a certain rich taste. But because it tends to be a bit more expensive, it's easier to use these other types of margarine. So with our liquids, when we're adding them to the mixture, we will always prioritize the yeast because we want to make sure that all of that goes into our mixture, and then we'll go to the eggs and then we'll go to the milk. So for this, we're going to go in with our hands and we're just going to mix that until it becomes like breadcrumbs. And just a recap, we started out with 3.5 cups of flour, half a cup of sugar. We had a teaspoon of salt. I think it was half or 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Yeah, it was 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And then we mixed that up, and then we've now added our margarine. We also added some spices. That was half a teaspoon of nutmeg and a teaspoon of cinnamon. And now for the yeast reveal. We had put aside our yeast. We actually had about a cup of water or half a cup, a teaspoon of sugar, and then we put 2 teaspoons of yeast. So it has grown. Let's check that out. It's so cute. So we're going to now pour that in here, because it's our main ingredient to bring out the taste of a cinnamon roll. What I usually do is I'll get the foam first so that I make sure that I have all of that, and then the water, the rest of the water. Sometimes when you do this, you may not use the other ingredients, really, the other wet ingredients, but that's why it's very important to measure your water. About half a cup of water should do. From this mixture, I feel like if we put in the eggs and the milk, we may not use all that liquid. So we'll just put in a bit of both until it becomes a dough. Let's put in some of our eggs, not all. And some of our milk. About half of it. I debated using a smaller dish earlier, but I'm glad that I used this instead. Okay, so we need more liquid. Let's add in all our eggs. We may not have to use the rest of the milk. Though if you want more milk, if milk is your preference, then you could use 1 egg and then the rest of it would be milk. Sometimes as you mix, you may find that your dough becomes a bit sticky, and it's usually okay to add a little bit of flour. So I'm going to do that. Doesn't have to be too much. Like I shared previously when we started out and we were making our rock buns, one of the good indicators of, a good dough is that your dish or whatever it is you're using is pretty much almost totally clean. So you see that? Our dough is ready. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an atmosphere for it to rise, because that's what the yeast is supposed to make it do. It's supposed to rise. So we're going to create an atmosphere for that to happen, and that usually requires a bit of warmth and a bit of moisture. So how do we do that? We use a warm tea towel, a kitchen towel you have, and you're going to warm that up with some hot water. Yeah, and then spread it out and cover your dough, and you'll put your dough aside for about an hour. So that's our dough. It's good and ready, and I'm going to put a warm towel on top of this, and then you can put it off somewhere in a dark corner or somewhere on the side and just give it an hour to rise. Sometimes you can actually put it in an empty oven because that's dark, warm, and that sort of thing, dry. So let me just warm our towel that we're going to use. I have a towel here. I usually wind up using these hand towels as kitchen towels because I don't like colorful kitchen towels. If anyone has a plug for white kitchen towels, please share. But this is what I'm going to use. So I'm just going to make it wet with some hot water, and then we will cover and put this aside to rise, okay? Let's do that. You can usually put it even in a dish and warm it up from there. I'm just being a bit risque, but yeah, this works. And if it's too hot, if you feel like it's too hot, you can just pour a little bit of cold water on there. And you'll squeeze it out. These are our home simple methods that anyone can use. It doesn't have to be complicated. I'm sure there are other methods, but this is the one I am used to. So we'll cover that. Just cover it up like that and put it aside and wait for it to rise, okay? So let me do that now. As we wait for our dough to rise, there are 2 other ingredients we must make. The first one is the filling of the cinnamon roll, and that's where most of the cinnamon actually comes in. So we are going to use half a cup of sugar and 3 teaspoons of cinnamon, and we're going to stir that up and put it aside. The longer it sits aside, the better, because then the cinnamon and the sugar come together to create the perfect filling for your cinnamon roll, okay? So let's do that right now. Like I said, half a cup of sugar is slightly over 6 tablespoons of sugar. So you can use the cup or you can use the tablespoons. It doesn't really matter. For this, we're going to use the tablespoons. In case you don't have cups at home, you can still bake using spoons, okay? So let's measure out our sugar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We say it's slightly over 6, so we'll just go in with with half, and that should be it. And then we're going to add our cinnamon, 3 teaspoons of that. You can use the measuring teaspoon, or if you don't have that, the actual teaspoon. I think to just make it a bit different, let's use this one. You don't need to heap it too much, just a little bit like that. And that. And those are 3 teaspoons. And we're just going to mix that up. Just simple mixing, and it's done. The longer this sits aside, the better. If you remember to do it much earlier, that's also okay. But doing it right now is fine as well, because it's going to take a while for our dough to rise. Okay, and we're good. We're just going to put that aside. You can cover it, you can leave it open. It's good to cover, so in a few, I'm just going to look for something to cover this up. For now, it can just sit here. Then we're going to make the second part. The second part is what we'll call the icing drizzle that we put on top of the cinnamon rolls. I feel like cinnamon rolls are too sweet already. I don't understand why anyone would want to put a topping of icing sugar on that. But I know that for some of you, that is going to be a preference. So we will still get that done. So let's get it with that. And for this mixture, we have 4 ingredients. We have our icing sugar, butter, milk, and vanilla. Let me get our vanilla. Yeah, our vanilla is here. So let's just do that. So a typical mixture would take about 2 cups of icing sugar, but I feel like that's a bit much. We do not need that much because we're not going to drizzle all over all the cinnamon rolls. So we're just going to do a cup of icing sugar. For many people, it's important that they sieve, and I think it's good to sieve. I was saying how I no longer enjoy sieving anything, but let me try to behave, and I will sieve our icing sugar. So we're going to sieve our icing sugar to make the drizzle, and I'm looking for a cooler sieve than this, but pink is a great color. Matches with mustard somehow. So we're going to sieve that. I know for some reason sieves come in really odd colors. I don't understand that. It's like the bright pinks, the bright yellows, bright oranges, but I have bright pink over here and it's cute. Is that pink or is it fuchsia? What shade of pink is that? So we're going to sieve a cup of icing sugar. For some reason, sometimes icing sugar has like blobs in it. So I'm just crushing those before we do the actual sieving. This is my favorite sieve. I've had it for a very long time. Sometimes your favorite, whether it's a utensil or something that you have in the house, even when you should get a new one, you just feel like you're going to hold on to it. So we're done with that. And it looks really good. That's our icing sugar, 1 cup. And now we are going to melt 2 tablespoons of butter. So let's do that, or rather margarine, 2 tablespoons. So we're going to melt them very quickly in the microwave. Can use a different, let me use the same spoon. So we're going to melt 2 tablespoons of margarine. Let's just do that now. So we're going to melt these 2 tablespoons of margarine. Let's do that real quick in the microwave. About 20 seconds should do it. You have to make sure it doesn't get really hot. You just need it to melt, okay? So there we are. We have our 2 tablespoons of margarine, and now we're going to get some milk. I had put aside some of the milk that we were using earlier. So we need 4 tablespoons of milk. We need our melted butter, and then the final product will be our vanilla, and we're going to use a whisk for this. So let me start by putting in our melted butter. Actually, I've realized that this mixture is if we were using 2 cups of icing sugar. Since we're using 1 cup, we need just about half of this. So I'm just going to estimate that. After you've melted your butter or your margarine, I've used about 4 tablespoons of that. We've put our margarine, we're going to add some milk. The beauty about using butter, if you can, instead of margarine is that margarine has that natural yellow color. And so you find that the drizzle winds up looking a little bit yellow instead of white. Let's add a little bit of milk so that it can actually pour. And just a reminder, we did not need all that margarine, we just needed about half of it. So we should have melted 1 tablespoon of margarine. But if you're doing 2 cups of icing sugar, then you can use all that margarine in the mixture. And this is our drizzle. You want to make sure that it can actually fall off like that. And to top that all off and give it a vanilla flavor, we have our vanilla. So let's add it. Two teaspoons. Let's give it that really beautiful and strong vanilla taste. Every time a recipe says 1 teaspoon of vanilla, I use 2, because I just really love vanilla, and I feel like this can give it that imaginary taste, like you have vanilla ice cream. So see that? Our drizzle is ready. And we're going to put that aside. We will use this at the end. So, and that's it. So we have our filling ready and we have our drizzle ready. Now we're going to wait for our dough to rise. Okay. So it's been about an hour and we had to leave our dough to rise. We put a hot towel on top and created an atmosphere for it to actually rise. So we're going to check it out right now. Wow, it has actually risen. Look at that. And you can see it has bubbles. You press that. And so now we are going to roll it and actually make our cinnamon rolls. And if you're going to roll here, we need to put some flour. My hands are clean, but just in case you think they're not, let me wash them again. And let's just wipe the counter one more time. It's clean, but we'll just wipe it one more time to make sure. And we're going to put some flour on here so that our dough does not stick. We'll knead it a little bit and then we will roll it. So it's now a rectangular shape. Roll it till it's about 1/2 inch. And now we're going to go to the part of filling. So for our filling, remember we made some cinnamon sugar, which is our mixture that we have here. Change that to a bigger spoon. But in order to put that on here, we need something to help it stick. And so we're going to put margarine on here. We need 2 tablespoons that we're going to spread here. And then we're going to roll and cut our cinnamon rolls. So we have our margarine here. It's our usual. And we're going to get 2 tablespoons and spread them out on this amazing shape of ours. 1 tablespoon, 2. And for that, we're just going to spread it evenly. And we try to sort of avoid the edges. And like I said, you can use margarine, and if your preference is butter, you can use actual butter for this. So we are spreading this as a base that we're going to use for our cinnamon sugar. We don't get to the very edge, but if we do, it's not a very big deal as well. That's why cinnamon rolls taste really good. They just have all the, for the health buffs, they'll say they just have everything unhealthy. But a cinnamon roll is not something you can eat every day. It's really just comfort food, seasonal food. This is really good around Christmas, because Christmas is like a whole cheat season, right? You can eat whatever you want for at least 3 days. I would say 24th, 25th, and 26th. If you're on a diet, get back on the wagon on the 27th. So we're just going to spread that evenly across, and this is really a treat. You can use butter or margarine. Once you've done that and you've created your amazing base, avoiding the edges, what some people will do is they'll brush the edges with egg or milk, but it's not necessary. We can go the simple route. We don't have to do that. But if you want to, you can do that. So we're done with that. And now it's time to spread our cinnamon sugar. You could use a spoon, but I find that it's more evenly spread if I actually use my hands. And so we're just going to make sure that every area here has cinnamon sugar on it. And it seems like a lot of sugar, right? Well, like I said, this is comfort food, and it's something you'll eat, once in a while. The calorie count on this is really high, so you can't become too comfortable and try to make this almost every day. This is really fun to do with kids as well. Try and make sure there's no spot that has butter or margarine that is missed. We're going to roll, but I don't want any of the cinnamon on my hands to go on top as we roll. So I'm going to wash my hands again. You have to make sure your hands are clean so that the top of the cinnamon roll doesn't have this mixture. I'm cleaning this so we avoid that same issue. So now we are going to roll this, and like I said, it's really fun for kids especially. So we're ready, and we're going to go like that. And what we do is we first make sure that this is off the ground, and we really want to make our rolling tight, yeah? So you're not going to do big chunks of rolling. You go really small bits at a time. If you are with someone else or with a child, one of you can take one side and the other takes the other side. And we are at the end. Then we come to the part of cutting. It depends on which knife you want to use. For the starting cut, I usually prefer to use this knife. This is a bread knife. I think people have another name for it, but it's a bread knife. So I'm going to use 2 knives so that we can just see the difference. And some people use the thread cut. They use a special kind of thread to actually cut through. So there are many options you can use to cut. So we have our bread knife, and let's have a regular knife as well. So, and we have a regular knife here as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by splitting this in half, and then we'll deal with one half of it, and then we'll deal with the other half. So here we go. Now, where is half? Let's see, where is half? Does this look like half? Okay, I think so. So I feel like the bread knife at times has an easier and cleaner cut. And so we've done that. And we're going to move this to the side and move this closer to us. And still with this, you're going to gauge and see where half is. And the aim is that after we cut that, then we'll get 3 pieces from each. You can do thicker ones if you want to, but I would say that these are about 6 pieces. So let's look for the half and let's see which knife is better. So is this half? Let's see. I feel like the bread knife has a cleaner cut. So we've been able to establish which knife is better. And now we're going to split these into smaller portions. So you gauge beforehand. Okay. For some people, this would be 4. I feel like 3 is good. Have that and that. And there you have it. We have our 12 cinnamon rolls. Now we're going to put them on the tray or in the pan. We have 2 options for that, and I want to share that with us. For this, as you roll it, you can go bigger, you can go smaller, you can multiply the mixture we shared earlier and make more. It's really up to you. So we're going to use both a tray. Typically a cinnamon roll cinnamon rolls are supposed to be baked in a deep set pan, but you can also use a tray if that's what you have at home. So we're going to do both and we'll see how that turns out. So we have our tray here. We have our tray, but I think, let me put the tray here. And then we're also going to get one of our deep set pans and decide which one we're going to use. We can use a cake pan. They're actually cinnamon roll pans that you can use. For our baking, we can use our tray and then we can use this sort of casserole dish or deep set pan, which is what many people use for their cinnamon rolls. So we're going to place a few on the tray and a few here, and then we will leave them to rise for about another hour and a half, and then we will bake them after that. So let's do that right now. I'll just remove these. I think I'll remove them later. So for this, we have, as usual, we have to put some margarine on the tray to make sure that these don't stick, because they even have melting sugar, which even makes it harder. So we're going to do that, and we're going to do the same here. So let's just get to doing that. And so our pans are ready, and now we are going to place our cinnamon rolls. Like I said, you can make them bigger or you can make them smaller. It's really up to you. And so we've laid them out, and we're going to give them some room and time to rise, and then we will bake them. The beauty about the final baking process is it doesn't take too long. This whole process has been long, but the baking itself will not take that long. So yeah, we're good. We've set this here and we've set these 6 here, and now we're going to put them aside and have them rise for about an hour and a half, and then we will bake them. So let's wait for that moment. Yeah.
A few moments later.
We are back. It's been actually 2 hours. So I had said that you could leave the cinnamon rolls to rise for about an hour and a half. But if in case you wind up having to do some things, 2 hours is not bad either. So here we are. If you remember the size they were before we put them in, and then you see this right now, amazing, right? Yeah, so right now we're going to bake them. Baking can take anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes. It shouldn't be much longer than that because you want them to remain soft, but they must be brown on top, golden brown. So that is what we're going to do. So we have 2 batches. We're trying the tray and we're trying this amazing casserole dish, which is the one we're going to bake first. So we're going to do this one first, and yeah, let's bake. Let me just check if our oven level is right. Yeah, it's perfect. So We're baking still. The setting is the 2 lines, and then that means heat from up and down. And then we are going in with about 170 degrees. So let me just adjust that a little bit. Yeah, so 170 degrees, and we're putting this in first. Yeah. So let's wait and see how that turns out in about 20 minutes. We'll be back. We are back. It's so exciting that our cinnamon rolls are ready. It feels like it's taken a whole day to make them, right? At some point, I actually wound up having lunch while waiting for this to get done. And that was through the rising process, and now it's all baked, and this is the color we are going for. It should be golden brown. So for some people, you can actually have the cinnamon rolls just as they are, because I mean, they're good to go. They're soft, they're amazing, they're tasty. I've washed my hands and I'm ready to eat. But we're going to put a little bit of a drizzle on top. So I typically would go without the drizzle at all because I feel like this is already too much sugar. But if you want to have that extra comfort food, like a hug moment, then the drizzle will do that for you. So let's just go on and drizzle a little bit of this on top. We don't have to do too much. It's just, you just go in with a little bit of this, dropping it on. Let's see if we can. I think I'm gonna use a spoon, yeah? Let me just use a spoon for that. Because what will typically happen is that our drizzle will wind up melting just a little bit. And that's what we want, really. It looks like a really cute glaze. I thought I'll just drop it on there, but I think the idea of the spoon is much better. You're just going to go over your cinnamon roll like that. It's melting on there and it's gorgeous. So it's a cross between a drizzle and a glaze. You're trying to get some shine while getting some sugary goodness. Kind of between icing sugar and getting it to have a bit of shine. It's so cute. And the next part is going to be how tasty it is. Can you believe it? If you're following with me and you're making this right now, I'd love to see photos of what yours look like. And ours is ready. It looks amazing. You can't fail to want to add just a little bit when you see a corner that you feel could do with a little bit more. But it's up to you really how much you put on there. So our second batch is finally ready too. And while we use that drizzle and icing sugar in here, you can actually give this a bit of a glaze using some butter or some margarine. And so I have my brush here and I'm just going to get some of this margarine and go over them like that so that they don't look pale. And this is also for people who don't want to add more sugar to the pastry, because the pastry is already very sweet. So this is what we do to make that look amazing. And we're going to call it a day and go have some of our amazing cinnamon rolls. It's a comfort food day. So exciting. And we're done. Actually, for this glaze, while I'm using margarine and you can use butter, you can also use raw egg if you'd like. And then you can also use just a bit of milk. You could use your brush in milk and just go over them like that, just to give them a bit of shine. I'm not a fan of raw eggs, so that's why I wouldn't do that. And I'm not a fan of milk either. And the mixture already has milk, so we're good to go. We're done with that. And next, it's going to be time to taste. But I was thinking about yeast. You know, when the Israelites were leaving Egypt, they had to rush. And in that process, any food they were going to carry, especially bread, was not going to have any time for them to use yeast, so it would rise. The whole process that we've gone through would not have been possible for them. The Israelites ate bread often, but in that moment as they were living, they could not use yeast. And so after that, God commanded them, it's around Exodus chapter 12, God commanded them that they were to make sure that they commemorated that season for 7 days every year. And that is a practice that they've done to this day by making sure that they do not eat any yeast in those days. So during that season, they eat bread which does not have yeast, just to remember that time that they were leaving Egypt. The Christians later in the New Testament, around John, in one of the chapters in John, the Christians later likened Christ to that bread, the unleavened bread. They likened Christ to him because in their view, many of them saw yeast as something that represented sin, and that made Christ to them like the one without sin. Later, Paul talks about yeast and he says, a small batch of yeast spreads through a big dough. And he was referring to that also just to indicate to them how fast sin can spread. So just thinking about that and thinking about the process we've taken to make these cinnamon rolls, which can look like it's taking a whole day. Sin can take up a lot in our lives, but also we have an opportunity to remember what God did when he saved the Israelites from Egypt. And so as we go on to enjoy this, we just have to remember that God has loved on us and he saved us from sin and he has called us to salvation by grace. And if you'd like to have a conversation about that with me, go ahead in the comments. You can inbox me. Please follow Karen's Cook and Bake Therapy, which will still be on my pages, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, wherever it is. You can find me at Karen Hasasha. Thank you for watching, and please like, share, subscribe, try the recipe, and come back and share feedback, okay? So we're going to go ahead and taste this, and it's about to be out of here. Let me do that now. It already feels yummy even before I taste it. So time to dive in. I can't talk, guys. Bye. See you.